Coming up on the Angus Report, hear from a New Mexico State Extension specialist on why you should test your water quality.
Are you feeding hay? Stay tuned for some smart hay buying tips.
We get the latest Angus market report from Regional Manager Jake Pickering.
And we travel to Hawaii for the Certified Angus Beef Annual Conference. This is the Angus Report. Welcome to the Angus Report. I'm Bob Cervera.
And I'm Clint Mefford.
Today, we're talking about how water quality affects beef cattle reproduction. Craig Gifford, an extension beef cattle specialist for New Mexico State University, spoke at the 2018 Applied Reproductive Strategies Workshop in Ruidoso, New Mexico. Gifford touched on how water quality can impact beef cattle reproduction.
In one case, you have elements within the water that can have a direct effect, negative effect on reproduction. For instance, sulfates. According to data out of South Dakota State University, that sulfates may negatively impact both calf performance and pregnancy rates. On the other side, hard water can limit water intake, which will also limit dry matter intake, so from a nutritional perspective can have a negative impact on reproduction.
He also shares where water quality problems are present in the U.S. and told producers to be aware of the possible issues in your area.
So for sulfate problems in water are actually found throughout the western United States. So several states, even South Dakota, for instance, struggle with that. It's different pockets usually within a state. It can be, sulfates are a big one in our area. Total dissolved solids are another. If you're in areas that have risk of, say, agricultural runoff or some mining operations, perhaps nitrates. And then also, another big one are things like the cyanobacter that leads to the blue-green algae, which can also be a toxicity issue.
Gifford warns producers that just because you might not have a water quality problem now, it doesn't mean you're in the clear.
The way that breeders can ensure their water does not negatively impact reproduction, first is really get a water test, and that's first and foremost. So once they have a water test, then they can formulate their mineral program to match whatever they're dealing with from the perspective of their water quality. If water quality gets too bad, it's expensive, labor intensive, and really no good options if the water's bad enough. A couple of the biggest common misperceptions are that you can smell sulfate in the water. You cannot smell sulfate. You can smell, to a lesser degree, some of these sulfides, but that's not what really we deal with in terms of a toxicity issue. So one, you can't smell sulfate. You can only test for it. And then the other big misconception is that people assume their water is good. They've never had an issue, and so they assume their water is fine, but the reality is your water's fine till it's not. And you find out it's not fine by dead cows. And I think it's better to approach it from a very inexpensive water test up front versus trying to find dead calves later.
Contact your local extension office to learn more about water testing.
A severe drought hit large portions of the country this summer and forced producers to feed winter hay to cattle early. Farmers and ranchers' demand for quality hay made prices skyrocket. There are steps producers should take into consideration when buying hay. The first is determining feed quantity needs. Producers should calculate the pounds needed to get a herd through a feeding period. Hay waste should be included in the total pounds needed. The second step is to take a feed inventory. It's important to note the feed quality and quantity. The third step when evaluating hay for purchase is determining shortfalls, as your current inventory of feed may not have enough total digestible nutrients that are needed for a long feeding period. Producers should analyze hay nutrients and determine which supplements should be added to the diet. The final step when purchasing hay is comparing pricing on a per unit of nutrient basis. Contact your local extension nutritionist or veterinarian for more information on hay quality.
An August 15th ruling from the South Carolina U.S. District Court stated the Environmental Protection Agency failed to meet requirements for a public notice or comment period before retracting the 2015 Waters of the U.S. rule. The ruling has reinstated the WOTUS rule in 26 states. 24 states have issued stays against the ruling, blocking the regulation. The administration rescinded the Clean Water Act in January and started with a new one. The suspension prevented the 2015 WOTUS rule from going into effect until February 6, 2020. The language in the WOTUS rule left many people in the agriculture community skeptical. Several agriculture groups are calling for a complete repeal of the 2015 WOTUS rule. The same group is urging a Texas-based court to issue a nationwide injunction.
Tyson Johnson, a ranch manager at Sooner Cattle Company, spoke at the K-State Ranching Summit. He told producers transparency is best with his employees. Johnson encourages producers to be clear about major decisions on an operation.
You know, we found at the ranch that transparency is very important. The main reason to get buy-in and employee engagement, you know, just it's our human nature to get engaged if we know the reason why we're doing things. And so it's always good if people know that reason. And the only way you can get that is through transparency. And probably the side note, it keeps me honest as well. You know, if they know the decisions I'm making and the things that I'm doing, then they can get involved and get behind the direction of the company and the overarching objectives of the company.
Johnson shares how Sooner Cattle Company communicates with its employees.
It's a really good system that we have there at the ranch to get everybody engaged in what we're doing, and it starts off with a strategic plan that people are involved in, that in the development of, as far as creating goals and specific action items that we're going to do that year to accomplish certain goals. And that rolls all the way down into resource management plans for their camp or their area of stewardship. And obviously we go over the financials with all the employees as well, and they're involved knowing how that's affecting their stewardship. And so those are probably really the big ticket specific items that we've done to create transparency and to create employee engagement.
Johnson thinks a key starting point for transparency can stem from managerial accounting.
You know, in real layman's terms, managerial accounting is really the process of extrapolating numbers from the accounting system that you have to generate reports that you use to make day-to-day decisions. And so it's different for everybody according to their objectives and their goals of their company.
Stay tuned, more Angus Report after a break. Welcome back to the Angus Report. The American Angus Association regional managers are the boots on the ground for the association.
Clint caught up with Jake Pickering, one of the regional managers from the West.
Jake, give us an overview of the sales season this fall.
Well, hey Clint, thanks for having me first off, but this fall has kind of been my first fall run, these sales here in California, and it's been just awesome so far. We've had a great set of cattle, we've had a great run of sales. So far into the month, we've had about 16 or 17 purebred Angus sales, mainly just selling bulls. And looking back compared to last year's historic prices and compared to this year, most sales were within a couple $100 of their averages in the past, with a couple being quite a bit higher. So to date, we're averaging about $400 or $500 more at the per head than we did last year. So it's been a great run with some great people.
How can an Angus bull really work in some of those big country areas, right? What positives do they bring to the table from a commercial producer's perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question, Clint. Well, luckily, a lot of these Angus breeders actually run cattle in similar type environments that the commercial cattlemen do. And so a lot of these bulls are raised to that environment. They understand it. They're born and raised there, so that when they get older, it's just kind of second nature to them to go out on those commercial operations and work for those cattlemen.
So one of your jobs is, of course, to serve as an advisor to Angus breeders and commercial producers looking to invest in Angus genetics. But what other support do you give from a marketing perspective?
From a marketing perspective, directly to the purebred breeders, I work with the Beef Bulletin and Angus Journal quite a bit. We try to get their sales advertised. And then also if I get phone calls from cattlemen looking for Angus bulls, I can kind of send them in the right direction for what they're looking for. When it comes to helping out commercial guys, you know, we have these new commercial programs, Angus Link and Angus Source, which have been really exciting out here. In California specifically, program cattle are very popular. And so Angus Source adding on, the NHTC, Never Ever stuff and cattle care and handling, that'll just be huge out here to aid these guys that have been buying these Angus bulls and wanting to market their Angus sire genetics.
So what's coming up for the rest of the fall sales season and into the spring?
Well, the biggest chunk of my sales season's about over. the next month or so, next 2 months really, I'll have some sales scattered, usually 2 to 3 a week, but nothing crazy. And then once we roll into the spring, that's when the other part of my region really gets busy. Nevada and Utah will pick up, and there'll be a couple sales down in Arizona. They just calve in different seasons, and so they market their bulls in the spring. So I'm really looking forward to getting back out there to Utah, meeting more people out there, and hopefully selling some more bulls this next spring.
One thing to give our producers a little bit of perspective on is your region is very large and the landscape is very, very diverse. And so you work with a wide variety of Angus producers with a lot of different operations. How do you yourself stay educated and help them stay educated on programs and services and just being in the know?
Diverse is the best word to describe my region, I feel, so far. And I've kind of spent this first year just learning as much as I can, especially being from California originally. I can get a pretty good handle on that. But when it comes to Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, the way they do things in those states just is different, just based off their environment. So this spring was great for me. I got to spend a lot of time in Utah to meet with those guys, kind of understand their challenges, the problems they're facing and the things they have to do, and just the times where they're marketing cattle and just the ways they do business. And so it's been a challenge, but it's been a lot of fun. And so once I know what their challenges are, hopefully I can work with them and try to figure out what they need to do to make their business successful.
Right. Well, thank you, Jake. And on behalf of the association staff here in St. Joseph, we're very appreciative for all you do on behalf of the breed and the membership. And we wish you safe travels for the rest of the fall.
Thank you, Clint.
Hello, I'm Troy Bockelman with the Cattle Facts Update. Well, there was a wet, wintry spring in much of the major crop-growing regions that resulted in delayed planting for some regions. Mother Nature provided excellent growing conditions for much of the U.S., and this is evident in the estimated yields for both corn and soybeans. The September USDA WASDE was released, and a record corn yield in August was estimated larger. The USDA estimates that the 2018-19 crop year corn yield will be 181.3 bushels an acre, up from 178.4 bushels an acre in August. This resulted in production of 14.827 billion bushels, up from 14.6 billion bushels last year. With the supply increase, usage was adjusted higher for exports, ethanol, and feed and residual. As demand increased faster than supply, the market is working through the carryover supplies. Ending stocks for U.S. corn are estimated at 1.77 billion bushels, down from 2 billion a year ago. As a result, stocks to use for the current market year are estimated at 11.7%, down from 13.4% last year. Soybeans also saw an increase in yield from August to September, as the USDA estimated a record soybean yield of 52.8 bushels an acre in September. Soybean production is estimated 300 million bushels higher than last year at 4.69 billion bushels. With the increased corn yield, demand was increased to offset the increased production. This was not the case in soybean, as trade tensions with China resulted in estimated exports decreasing 70 million bushels from a year ago and only a 15 million bushel increase in soybean crushings. As a result, there was a record ending stocks estimated at 845 million bushels, over double last year's carryout. Stocks to use for U.S. soybeans are estimated at 19.8%, up from 9.1% last year and the largest since 1986. This increased soybean supply, as well as trade tensions with China, will likely keep soybean prices subdued into 2019. For the Angus Report and Cattle Facts, I'm Troy Bockelman.
To learn more about Cattle Facts, your leading source for beef industry market information, visit cattlefacts.com.
Next on the Angus Report, we hear from Angus Genetics Incorporated Director of Genetic Research.
He tells us about the DNA profile built specifically for Angus cattle, Angus GS. Stay tuned. Angus GS is the American Angus Association's DNA profile that's designed specifically for Angus cattle. Dr. Stephen Miller is the Director of Genetic Research for Angus Genetics Incorporated, and he helped design the test alongside researchers at Neogen GeneSeq. We sat down with him to learn more.
Angus GS is a great tool to use to get your genomically enhanced EPDs. It basically adds accuracy to selection at a young age. So, you know, the sooner they can sample those calves after birth, get the samples in, results back, and make selection decisions from there. A question I always get is, you know, what does GS stand for? And GS stands for genomic selection. And genomic selection is what we do when we calculate genomically enhanced EPDs.
Miller says genomic data from the association is a driving factor for the test.
When we put Angus GS together, there's the SNPs that actually get used in the evaluation, but there's also SNPs that we're currently investigating as part of our research into fertility, for example, meat quality. You know, we put those SNPs on that chip, so every time Angus GS is run, we get more information that we can use here in the association for research to basically determine how those SNPs are actually related to the traits of interest, things like fertility, for example. That then gives us, that could change in the future, what SNPs we actually use in the evaluation. So Angus GS really is a kind of a new paradigm of genomic testing for Angus cattle, because it really is the first time we've actually made a commitment that we're going to build a chip specifically for our needs. We've made that commitment.
Miller explains the advantages of using Angus GS.
The cost dropped down to $37 and for a high density test, whereas before they were paying $45 for a low density test. So that was a huge improvement. And what we've seen since the launch of Angus GS and that price drop is actually increased testing. So, you know, testing's up, more volume, and with this partnership really with Neogen to design a custom chip, we're really a preferred customer with Neogen. And, you know, our samples get high priority when they hit that lab. So when we get a sample in here, typically it's out the next day, overnight to Neogen. They get that sample, they turn results around, and those results come back electronically to us on average, since Angus GS was launched, in 11 days. And that 11-day turnaround is really, I think, a great advantage to Angus breeders, just to get that information as fast as they can. So not only are breeders seeing a better test with higher density at a lower price, but it's actually getting delivered the fastest we've ever seen.
Miller encourages producers to continue collecting data on cattle. He says it's important to continue to know the data and genotype information on tested animals.
One of the perceptions when genomics first came out was that it's really independent of the data, that we had these measurements that breeders were taking and the pedigree that contributed to their EPDs. But then the scientists came along with genomics that determined what genes were involved, and they came up with their predictions for the traits straight with DNA. What people need to realize is actually the predictions we make based on the DNA is actually based on the records and the pedigree that's in the database. It's not something that we determine independently. So without Angus's data, we could never come up with the genomically enhanced EPDs that we have with the accuracy that we have today.
Visit angus.org/AGI to learn more. Don't change the channel. Up next, we catch up with Clint Mefford at the Certified Angus Beef Annual Conference after a break.
"40 years is an amazing accomplishment for the association, the Certified Angus Beef brand, the producers, and of course, the consumer. It's really a testament to the hard work and trust the breed provides. Certified Angus Beef Annual Conference did it big in Maui, Hawaii this year, and they look back at the milestones and achievements of the past 40 years, but just as important, they look forward to the next 40.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our historic birthday. We are here to celebrate the Certified Angus Beef brand, but more importantly, the producers that feed the world the best beef God could provide. Welcome to 40 years. Welcome to Certified Angus Beef, Maui, Hawaii. Chef, if you would.
On the island of Maui sits a beautiful beach, some hotels, hundreds of tourists, and 400 pounds of certified Angus beef brand smoked over hot coals. Not what you'd expect on a Wednesday morning at 4 a.m., but the certified Angus beef brand wanted to make a splash to celebrate their newest achievement, 40 years in the beef business. Not bad for a company that was founded in a garage just outside of Worcester, Ohio.
Well, we've gone through a major change in beef demand from where we were back in the early 1980s to where we are currently today. From 1980 to 1998, beef demand was cut in half. That means half the people aren't enjoying their eating experience. You know, we've gone from 1 in 4 steaks being an unsatisfactory eating experience where the eating experience has improved dramatically. Certified Angus beef has been a big part of that with improving the overall quality of the product, the consistency, the quality, upper 2/3 choice, the brand promise, all of those things have made a major difference.
Oh, I think just the feeling of team effort and the feeling of people being so excited about the quality that from basically the gate to the plate, and we all try to get the quality, whether it be at the producer level, at the feedlot level, or the retailer, wholesaler, packer level. We're all working for one end game, and you really feel that at this conference.
Well, I start coming to these conferences in the mid-'80s, so I've been around a long time. You always come, you always learn something. There's always something to take back with you that you can share with the folks around you, your buyers and the butchers. One of the most valuable thing is the camaraderie and talking to other retailers, to talking to the producers and the packers. You know, it's big. The meat business has become a big bond of people that are aligned, all to try to do the best for the end result, who's the consumer.
For 40 years, the Certified Angus beef brand has provided the highest quality beef. And to celebrate, they didn't hit the beach, they ate. Bob, the Certified Angus Beef Annual Conference was educational for all attendees who were there.
Yeah, and it looked like it was a lot of fun too. I can't wait to see what happens at next year's conference.
Right, it was very engaging.
That's all for this week's Angus Report. We'll return next week at this time for more cattle news and highlights.
In the meantime, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Angus TV, for more from the association. Thanks for joining us.